All right. Hey, Sylvia, where are you? Are you at home?
Yeah, same place, but different. Why are we recording where I am?
Well, because you're my sister, that's why.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yes,
anyway,
I'm
well,
home.
okay, got it. All right, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. And it is really great to see everyone here. We have folks that are a little bit new to us, so I'll just say before we get into it that we use this as a time to generally we've been focused on the Megillot. Now, technically, what would make the most sense for today, because it's also Tisha B'Av tonight, is to talk about Lamentations and to study it. But we won't do that because we have our regularly scheduled plan, which is the book of Ecclesiastes. We're still moving through it. I think we just finished, I think, chapter 6. So, what I would like us to do, though, is discuss Tisha B'Av a little bit. So let's start us off with saying our bracha, our blessing, which we do whenever we learn together. And for those of you who are new to it, you can just respond with Amen for the rest of our people saying the prayer. And it's blessed are you, God, ruler of the universe, who commands us with who sanctifies us with commandments and commands us la'asok b'divrei Torah to engage in Torah study. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
So we're going to discuss a little bit out of step with our typical Saturday learning, a little bit about Tisha B'Av, because tonight we begin that 25-hour period of mourning, of fasting, of contemplative sadness, and feeling the disturbance in the universe that is this terrible day in history, a day that has historical truths to it as well as legendary truths assigned to it. And what I mean by that is that the Jewish tradition says that this is the day when the first temple was destroyed in 586 BCE, but also the day in which the second temple was destroyed under a different pretense, a different context. And many other tragedies have been associated with this day. Probably the biggest example of that is the resistance against the Nazi persecution in Warsaw. In the Warsaw Ghetto was finally lost and understood as taking place on this day as well. Many Jews have associated this day also with the calamity of the dropping of nuclear warheads, atomic bombs, for the first time in history, which also took place in early August 1945. It is a day of tremendous loss, of death and destruction, both in a very particularist sense, that is, in the sense of the Jewish experience, as well as in the universalist sense of the destruction of life in the context of world events. There's also people who associate this day legendarily with the expulsion from Spain that and the beginning of the Inquisition on this day of Tisha B'Av. Again, Tisha B'Av, or not again, but noting that Tisha B'Av is literally the ninth day in the month of Av, and the day itself is seen as the real nadir of the Jewish experience, the low point of our experience. I've been sort of, in the last couple of years, pretty taken by the epiphany I had maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Um, was a personal epiphany that Jewish tradition inverts what is sort of commonly understood, that darkness is when there is light and light is when there is darkness. What do I mean by that? It means that arguably Tisha B'Av is at the hottest, most bright, most lit up, illuminated time of the year. It is summer, it's high season summer. It is the hottest days of the year, although right now it's a little bit modest here in Los Angeles. And it's in this time, this season of brightness and everything being so beautifully lit up, so to speak, that we see the darkest ways of humanity. We acknowledge all of the darkness of the human condition, the way in which we are very much subject to human tendencies that are not always the most beautiful ones. It's times like this that we remember that we, according to the rabbis, we are born with two inclinations, a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara, a good inclination, and that's the inclination for us to be good to each other and compassionate and kind, and a Yetzer Hara, an evil inclination or a bad inclination, the capacity for us to be hurtful to each other, the capacity for us to be really cruel to each other. And it's in this context that we remember the cruelty that came to us first at the hands of the Babylonians, and then, you know, that was 586 BCE, and then in 70 CE. So what is that? 656 years later, the destruction of the Second Temple under the Romans. And yes, we are not the ones who did it. But of course, that is a big conversation about what is our capacity as Jews to do good or to do bad. These are the conversations that come up in this holiday, because even though our tradition teaches that the Babylonians destroyed us under Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BCE, and even though the Romans destroyed our temple a second time in 70 CE, even though they were our enemies that hurt us, the rabbis immediately spiritualized this death and destruction, this cause of loss, as being the fault of the Jewish people. That's what's so interesting, right? It is the first temple that is destroyed in 586, the rabbis teach, it's destroyed because of our sinful behavior. We weren't following halacha. We were not following God's word, and the prophets railed against us, first destroying the northern kingdom. The northern kingdom was destroyed in the 700s BCE, and then in 586, what was the southern kingdom, or what's left of the Jewish people, Judean community, right? The land of Judah, and hence we're called Jews and Judaism. That was because in 586, we were not following the laws and we were punished according to the rabbis. And if you want to understand that, we'll go into it a little bit more with the Book of Lamentations. But this idea, this impulse of the rabbis not to say they hurt us and therefore we are to be vengeful toward the Romans or the Babylonians. The Jewish approach has been to say these forces came from God to punish us for our sinful behavior. Now, we don't talk a lot about sin as Jews. We sort of almost avoid it, except for Yom Kippur, when we go head first into it, talking about our sinful behaviors. But we don't hide away from it in this season. Collectively, we recognize as a community we have strayed. And so the temple was destroyed in 586 because of what we call sinat chinam. Well, it was really destroyed in 586 because of us not following Jewish law. But then in 70 CE, the tradition teaches that we were following the law. In fact, maybe we were following it so closely that we lost its sense of meaning and purpose, and as a result, we are punished. And specifically, the charge against the Second Temple period is what they call sinat chinam, or gratuitous hatred. Having hatred in our hearts for other people for no reason, for no logical explanation, we develop hatred. We develop competitiveness. And these are instincts that we have that are considered connected to Yetzer Hara. And so this holiday reminds us that we have to still be reflective, even when we have power. because the first temple is an expression of power and the second temple is an expression of power. In both cases, we had hegemony, we had control of Jerusalem, and we lost it twice out of our less than ideal ways of being. And so that's what Tisha B'Av is all about. These are not necessarily themes that are particularly popular in some Zionist circles. And in fact, there have been efforts over the years to remove Tisha B'Av as a holiday for the Jewish people because they say, well, why would we mark the destruction of the temple if we now have the Jewish state in our hands? And that's when the conversations turn to the question of, well, what are we doing with this Jewish state? And that's when it starts to get very political. And these political conversations are happening to this day. In fact, I would argue that they are reaching a feverish pace right now as we struggle with what to do in the Middle East at this moment. But if we go back to the holiday itself, it's an acknowledgement of our shortcomings as a community as opposed to our shortcomings as individuals. So there's a contrast between Tisha B'Av on the one hand and Yom Kippur, which we will be marking in a couple of months, which is about the individual capacity for doing the wrong thing and the importance of teshuvah, of repentance. So some people think of Tisha B'Av as the call for communal teshuvah. All of the Haftarot leading up to this day in the last few weeks have been oriented around telling us all the prophecies that have been stated about Israel getting in trouble for not doing the right thing. I think today was Shabbat Chazon today. I think it was Chazon Avadia,
Yeah.
and it was right. And in that Haftarah, when we chanted it, part of it is chanted in the tone of the book of Lamentations or Eicha. We'll talk a little bit more about that too. I want to get to some of the practical halacha related to Tisha B'Av, and then we'll go to some of the sources. So first of all, Tisha B'Av, the ninth of Av begins right as sun sets. And since right now it's Shabbat, it's this strange contrast between the Olam Haba, the taste of the world to come, Me'en Olam Haba, which Shabbat is, and this beautiful perfection. And then we're going to go into Tisha B'Av immediately, seamlessly. It's a very strange kind of feeling to go from the joys of Shabbat. Shabbat is always filled with oneg, which means delight. Oneg Shabbat is the delight of the Sabbath, and that's what we call our little nosh that happens after services. We call it Oneg Shabbat because it is celebrating the delight of the Sabbath. We go from that into mourning and all the rituals connected to mourning, all of the sadnesses that go with it. So just like if we were to observe a loss of a family member, one of the 7 relations that mourning is obligated, so too on this day, we do things that remind us of sadness. One of the things that's parallel between the two is to sit low to the ground or even on the floor. On Tisha B'Av, if you're going to a synagogue like Carlos is, and you said Ner Tamid, is that what it was? Carlos?
Yes, and Downey.
Yeah, so congregation Ner Tamid and Downey, and I know that at B'nai David they'll do it, and Deborah, I don't know if you're going to Ami Shalom, and I'm sure in Tucson as well. All of these shuls, it is common practice to recite the prayers, the penitentiary prayer, well, the prayers that are, or the text that we read on this holiday while sitting on the floor. Sometimes people will have candles, sometimes they'll distribute candles, and to recite as if we are in mourning. So too, when you're at a house of mourning, mourners will sit low to the ground on very low stools or even on the ground itself, on the floor. On Tisha B'Av, it is a fast day, and as a result, we do all of the fasts that you do all the fasting traditions that you also do on Yom Kippur. There are the Chameshet Inuyot, the five, um, what do you call Inuyim? Like oppressions of five uh, acts of mourning, I guess you could say, but that's not a good translation. Five expressions of suffering, and that includes not eating or drinking. That's probably the most commonly known one. Secondly, that you do not bathe, because bathing is something that, and by the way, all these things are emulating death on some level. You don't eat or drink. You don't bathe. You don't put on perfumes, right? You don't anoint yourself with oils and things like that. You don't wear leather shoes. Leather being an expression of opulence, of wealth. And if you're already like me and you wear non-leather shoes all the time, you might wear less comfortable shoes, shoes that are too tight, some way to diminish the joy of your feet. And then no sexual interactions, no conjugal relations with someone. Those are the five classic limitations on both Yom Kippur and on Tisha B'Av. So let's go through it again. Eating and drinking is one. Uh, no bathing is two. No leather shoes is three. And I would extend that to suggest no leather, period, but that's just me as a vegan. Number four, no sex. And then number five, oh, what was number five? What did I miss?
Anointing with oil, or did you
Oh,
say?
yes, anointing with oil, like putting on perfume. Thank you, Sylvia.
What, Rabbi?
Yeah.
What about just barefoot?
Sometimes in historical times, being barefoot was something that you would do on a fast day. It says that in Mishnah Ta'anit. But typical practice is not to be barefoot, but to put shoes on. There are some question marks about being barefoot in synagogues. I think there's mixed feelings about it, and I think that's part of why we don't really do that anymore. But in Mishnah Ta'anit, that is what is referenced. So
I just brought that up because I remember my granny just being barefoot.
Really? Interesting. Okay. There are other things that we don't do on Tisha B'Av specifically. For one, we don't learn Torah. The only things that we learn on Tisha B'Av are sad things. We might read Eicha, which is the Book of Lamentations. We might read what are called kinot, and I'll talk about that in a moment, which are these very sad poems. Some people will say you can read the book of Jeremiah because people say that Lamentations is actually written by Jeremiah and that he was predicting the destruction. And so there's some very sad passages in the book of Jeremiah that are, of the repent or else variety. But other than that, you just don't really learn Torah. There's some people who say you can read things that describe the destruction of the temple. So that is it in terms of learning. Also, if you go to a synagogue, it is customary not to say hello to people. You basically isolate yourself. You imagine yourself to be all alone at shul. You don't talk to someone. Now, I read somewhere that if someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, haven't seen you for a while" on Tisha B'Av, you don't have to just ignore them. You can be respectful and say, "Yeah, hi," but just minimize your response. And you could even explain, it's not customary. I don't follow the custom of actually talking to someone. And I think this little bit of halakha is particularly interesting because what it's saying is that on Tisha B'Av, you isolate, you separate, you make it so like you're as if you're detached. Because at that moment, God detached from the Jewish people for just a moment. And that's what Tisha B'Av is about. God let bad things happen to us. If you think of God's presence as being what we call in Jewish mysticism shefa, or this expression of this emanation of divinity that enters the world and keeps the world afloat, then Tisha B'Av is the moment when that shefa is cut off, the spigot is turned off, and all of a sudden we're alone. And so I think it's in that spirit that we don't greet one another. We just allow ourselves to pretend as if we're entirely detached from others. So that's another custom related to this holiday. I'm trying to think if there's any other customs that I'm forgetting about. Well, the big ones of the to-do variety, those are the don't do's. The big do's are reading the book of Lamentations, also known as Eicha, and then also reciting keynote. Now, as far as keynote are concerned, I'm just going to show you a book here. This book is titled Keynote for the Ninth of Av. And this is one. And here is another one, the Complete Tisha B'Av Service. This one is an Art Scroll special. And what it has in it are these liturgical poems. I'll just read a little bit of one. Here, I'll just open a random one. There are some that are more common than others. Here's one, keynote number 6, said to be by Rabbi Elazar Hakalir, one of the earliest Paitanim. A Paitan is someone who writes a piyut. What is a piyut? A piyut is a poem, a liturgical poem. And he says, this is the words, this translation says, everything came to a standstill. Turn away from me, those who exiled me made me here. They made me a filth and refuse amidst the flocks of my fellow nations. You have enveloped your heavenly tabernacle that it not see my earthly temple. You have enveloped yourself. Yourself is written in capital. So my warriors are overpowered. My enemies clapped their hands in derision, and my limbs faltered as they trampled all my heroes. Jerusalem has fallen. It remains sunk in the watery depths. My eye still longs for the vision of Zechariah, the son of Barachiah. But until we are shown miracles like those of Gilgal, that prophecy has been hidden. My eye brings forth tears because we are crippled by quicksand. God caused the destruction, then regretted it, summoning Israel to cry, saying, Al ele ani bochia, over these things I weep. So I think you can get a little bit of a sense, and then the next verse, just to see a little bit more here, I'll say a little more. On the surface of the Euphrates, her pious ones were mutilated, yet she remembered the splitting of the Red Sea of Reeds, even while her foundation was being destroyed. It's very interesting poetry, very strong poetry that speaks to destruction, and also this way in which God only appears in the shadows, does not appear directly to us, which is ironic because, again, it's the hottest time of the year. Oh, I didn't finish my comment about that. So Tisha B'Av happens in the hottest, brightest time of the year, and Hanukkah, which is a story of hope, happens in the absolute darkest time of year. And I just find that to be really interesting, that it's inverted from what people think of. People say, let your light shine. It's a beautiful thing. But in this instance, Jewish tradition says when it's light, it's dark, and when it's dark, it's light. Any questions or comments on any of the things that I've shared so far? Anyone?
No, it's just very interesting.
Great. Another piece of tradition is that on Tisha B'Av, we the daily prayer pattern is changed. On the ark, on typical arks, there is a curtain that is pulled open. On Tisha B'Av, we remove the curtain altogether. So that thing is called a parochet. and it's usually a tapestry of some sort, at least historically. That piece of synagogue architecture or ornamentation is removed altogether, making the Torah, the Ark, feel a little more naked. Um, Also, on Tisha B'Av in the morning, we do not wear tefillin, even though we normally wear tefillin, but we do wear tefillin at Mincha instead. It's the only time of the year, I think, when we wear tefillin. I haven't looked this stuff up. I'm just doing this part from memory. Um, and of course, on all holidays of mourning, we have special paragraphs that are recited in the Amidah, in the standing prayer, and only on those days. And those prayers are recited when we recite the Amidah on Tisha B'Av. There's one, I think, specifically that's only read once a year. I think it's called Havinenu. There's one called Anenu, which appears, I think, on all fast days. But on Tisha B'Av, there's an additional thing, or maybe it's Nachamenu. Now I can't remember. Well, we'll look it up, and maybe on Tuesday when we have our prayer class, we can discuss it. There's these special insertions that have to do with Tisha B'Av specifically, and others that are generally for any time there's a fast day. And again, we don't put on the tefillin in the morning. We only put it on the afternoon. Tisha B'Av is a work day. If you were in Jerusalem on Tisha B'Av, you would go to work. The stores are open and everything continues as is. The prohibition is to consuming food. It's not to remove all food that you're obligated, only to not eat it. So stores can remain open. Grocery stores can remain open. It's kind of cruel, but you could go shopping on Tisha B'Av as well. Anything else? Any other questions? I'll also say that ironically, I think we talked about this last week, there's a focus on this holiday that appears in Reform circles that is peculiar because the holiday happens in the middle of the summer, and summertime in the Jewish community, as we all know, is big for camp, going to camp. And Jewish summer camps will have Tisha B'Av observances. And mine did at Camp Swig when I was growing up. And I remember even fasting a little bit on Tisha B'Av at Camp Swig when I was just a little high schooler or whatever I was at that time. So people think Tisha B'Av is not part of Jewish custom or Reform Jewish custom, but in fact it really is. Deborah, yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think when I was scheduling my wedding some time back, we also weren't allowed to have that around this time of the year.
Yes, thank you for that. Were you going to ask about whether that's true? I didn't mean to cut you off.
What is the actual thinking about that? I mean, all I remember was that I couldn't choose this date.
Mm-hmm. It's customary not to get married for the 3-week period between the 17th of Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. Sylvia sent a little meme out that is basically a chart of the restrictions for each of the days. So the 17th of Tammuz, which was about 3 weeks ago, was the day that the rabbis deem the day, and I guess it's written maybe in the book of Chronicles this way, as the day when the Babylonians breached the walls of the ancient city of Jerusalem. So this was after Hezekiah's rule. Hezekiah had been able to fend off the city by building the Broad Wall. Any of you who have been to Israel might know about the Broad Wall. But at the time of the 17th of Tammuz in 586 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar was able to break through and was able to get in and do horrible things. 3 weeks later, he destroys the temple itself in Jerusalem. So this whole period is seen as a time of diminished joy. Some rabbis do not perform weddings between the 17th of Tammuz and the 9th of Av. And so that, Deborah, is what you're thinking of. There are some people who say the whole period is out except for Shabbat and the first of Av, because the first of Av is Rosh Chodesh, so people might get married on that day. But definitely Tisha B'Av would be out for doing a wedding.
What would happen if someone needed to be buried on Tisha B'Av?
As I understand it, burials do take place on Tisha B'Av. There's no restriction from doing that. The only time that you restrict a burial is on a fast, is on a Chag or on Shabbat. So this is neither a Chag nor Shabbat. A Chag technically means a day, a pilgrimage festival. So Shavuot, Pesach, or Sukkot. So it's not one of those. And it's not Shabbat. So we're good. Hello, kitty. So yeah, so that's not a problem. You can also get buried on Hanukkah and Purim and any of these other holidays. Okay, yes, Carlos.
Is there a connection between Tisha B'Av and high holidays?
Okay, hold on 1 second, Carlos. We're having some problems. I think anyone who is not speaking needs to be on mute. So Elias, I think you should mute yourself. There, it's good. I think we figured out how to fix it. We don't know why this is happening. One more time, Carlos.
Is there a connection between Tisha B'Av and the high holidays?
Well, there is in a couple of ways. On Tisha B'Av, as I said before, Tisha B'Av is acknowledging the sin of an entire community. The moral failure of the Jewish people is acknowledged on Tisha B'Av. Similarly, Yom Kippur is a day to acknowledge the moral failures of the individual. So there's a direct parallel in terms of topic, but a different focal point. Instead of it being the individual on Yom Kippur, it's the entire community on Tisha B'Av. Another connection between the two is I mentioned that there have been these haftarot of doom and gloom that are leading up to Tisha B'Av, culminating, or not culminating, the last one being the one that we had this morning for Shabbat Chazon, in which we read the prophetic single chapter book known as Ovadia. And in Shabbat Chazon, we hear about terrible things. All these haftarot up until this point have been really miserable. But as soon as Tisha B'Av happens, the next Shabbat will be Shabbat Nachamu. Shabbat Nachamu after Tisha B'Av Nachamu means be comforted. In fact, we'll sing Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami. And it's a great Shlomo Krobach melody. That's the first of several haftarot leading up until the high holidays. So the connection here is that the haftarot between Tisha B'Av and Rosh Hashanah are all nechemta, consoling haftarot. So after God destroys the temple through the agency of the Romans and the Babylonians, God then comforts us as a people and says it's going to be okay. So that's an important piece. Well, I'll just finish the thought. Those comforting haftarot, all from the book of Isaiah, if I remember correctly, all lead up to the high holidays themselves, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So there is a bridge formed in the tradition between Tisha B'Av and Rosh Hashanah. And Rosh Hashanah, of course, continues with Yom Kippur and even Sukkot. And we've talked about that over the years, the connections. But what was I going to say about that? Now I can't remember. Oh, well. Any other questions? Sylvia.
Well, just this morning we read Isaiah 1 through 127. We didn't read Ovadia. I'm sorry, I got mixed up when you mentioned that.
Okay.
It's the vision, the Shabbat of vision.
Oh, you know what? I called it Chazon, Shabbat Chazon, but I got my chazons confused because the
Oh,
first words of the book of Obadiah are chazon Obadiah. But you're right.
okay.
It's yes,
And I think the word eha is in there, and that's part of why. Oh, another
yes,
cat.
yeah. I got my. When do we read Obadiah? Now I can't remember. Yeah, but the first chapter of Isaiah is filled with doom and gloom. Here, I'll just share my screen really quickly. We can look at what you read this morning. Hold on. And then I think we've done 40 minutes of this. I do want to do a little bit of Ecclesiastes, but anyway, here's what was read this morning. I got my chazons confused. Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amoz, the prophecies of Isaiah son of Amoz, who prophesied concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the reigns of Uzziah, Yotam, Achaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. So this is now around 700 BCE, right? Because it's under, an earlier time. Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth, for God has spoken. I reared children and brought them up, and they have rebelled against me. The ox knows its owner, an ass its master's crib. Israel does not know. My people take no thought. Now I studied this with Jonathan, my friend Jonathan, my chavruta, and we talked about this text. It's just pretty amazing. Like, in other words, the Jews are more stupid than an ox or a donkey, right? The ox knows its owner, and the donkey knows its master's crib, but Israel does not know my people lo hit bonen. They are not understanding. Hit bonan. Like, we are lower than these animals. Hoi, as in oi, goy chote. Ah, sinful nation. Am keved avon zera mereim banim mashchitim. Sinful nation, people laden with iniquity, brood of evildoers, depraved children. They have forsaken Adonai, spurned the Holy One of Israel, turned their backs on him. So you can see that the Haftarah today is pretty darn miserable, and reminding and leading up to tonight's Tisha B'Av gatherings. So I think I can't say it enough. We have to be willing to look in the mirror. We have to be willing to look at our own moral failings. We have to be willing to understand that we are imperfect. And the rabbis are making it very clear. Why would they do this unless they believed that by recognizing our limitations, we can be a stronger people? And how amazing is it that we have a tradition that's willing to look at truth in the eye and say, you know what? We do fail. We do sin. We do horrible things. And the prophets are good at describing all the horrible things that we can do and have done. And, this is a big conversation right now. It's sort of a heart conversation that's happening in the Jewish people. Do we acknowledge our capacity to be hurtful? Do we acknowledge the way in which we're a little rough, or maybe a lot rough, or miserably rough? And we don't know necessarily which one it is with our neighbors in Gaza? Do we acknowledge the overreach? Do we bury the overreach? Do we say there is no overreach? Or do we say, yeah, we could do better? This is at the heart of it all, if you ask me. And it's painful because we carry a lot of pain, and we have a long history of a tremendous amount of pain. All the things that we mark on this holiday of Tisha B'Av are moments in which other people have inflicted pain on us. And yet on that day, we're going to talk about what we did wrong. That's hard. Yes, Deborah.
And hard as it is for us to do that reflectively, we also have to do it knowing that our enemies will exploit that, given the chance.
That's right. Um, let me see if I can find Psalm. I think it's Psalm 137.
While you're looking, can I ask you, there are certain psalms that are pretty miserable. If we really want to,
Be
I,
miserable. Yeah. Yeah, you
yeah, but
probably you could read those on Tisha B'Av, if that's the
okay.
question. You know,
Yes,
there's
that's my question.
you read them, but maybe you don't study them as like, happiness. There's a Psalm, what is it, 79 or something, that's just utterly miserable. Let me see if I can find it. But
Right.
I just want everyone to read these words to Psalm 137. This one would certainly fit in. And in fact, at camp, at summer camp, this is one that gets a lot of singing. By the waters of Babylon. We lay down and wept for thee, Zion. Right? So by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat and wept as we thought of Zion. What does that mean? It means the temple was destroyed, Jerusalem has been destroyed, and we have already been forced into exile. Where are the rivers of Babylon? This is the Tigris and the Euphrates. This is Iraq. This is the Jew sitting in far off Iraq by the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates, perhaps, sitting down and crying with yearning, bezochrenu etzion, with their memories, with our memories of Zion. Al Aravim Bitocha, there on the poplars, isn't that interesting that Aravim is poplars? Talinu Kinorotenu, there we hanged or hung, is probably more proper. We hung our kinor, our kineret, my daughter, our lyres, our harps. So we hung up our harps, and then look at this next verse. This gets me every time. Kisham she'elunu shovenu. There, our tormentors, our captors, shovenu, uh, asked us divrei shir for words of song, v'tolalenu, simcha, and for our amusement, something along those lines. And then here's the line, shiru lanu mishir tzion. It's like, imagine the Nazi in Auschwitz tormenting an inmate there, saying, hey, sing one of your stupid songs.
They did that.
Exactly. Like, sing for us from your idiotic Jew songs, with a heavy anti-Semitic tone. And then, of course, what do we say? Eich nashir et shir Adonai. How can we sing a song of God, al admat nechar, on foreign land? And then here's where that famous line comes in. Ve'im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yamini. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, may my right hand forget. Or as they say, let my right hand wither. I think there's a question about how to translate yamini, or I'm sorry, tishkach. Lishkoach is to forget. But sometimes this will be translated as let my right hand lose its cunning. Let's see how they do this here. Or forget its cunning. Right. In other words, let my right hand be powerless if I forget you, O Jerusalem. Tibak lishoni lechiki. Let my tongue stick to my palate. Im lo ezkarechi. Im lo a'ale et Yerushalayim. If I will not mention, let's see, how do we translate this? Im lo ezkarechi. If I will forget you, or if I do not remember you. Iskarechi, I guess it's a feminine. Whoops, sorry about that, everyone. Right, if I forget you, let my mouth, what's the point of me? If I don't mention you, my mouth is useless, so I might as well have my tongue stuck to my roof of my mouth. Im lo a'ale et Yerushalayim. If I don't cause memories of Jerusalem to go up in my heart. Al Rosh Simchati, in my happiest moments. So the yearning for Zion is very strong. Of course, that's another indicator that Zionism is not a 20th century creation. It's been around since the days of the Psalms, but also the context here is exile, of diaspora, of really expulsion. It's not just exile, it's expulsion. We were kicked out, we were sent off to Babylon. So, I'm putting a lot of time into this, but that's because this is the essence of it. It may not be what we do liturgically, but Psalm 137 stands out to me as an important piece of understanding the yearning and the sense of extraordinary discomfort and alienation that was experienced by our people when we were exiled and expelled from the land and the temple was destroyed. So you have to understand that when Jerusalem was destroyed, it wasn't just that the temple was like systematically destroyed and, the walls came, knocked down to the ground twice, including Herod's building, which was said to have been a bigger. The second temple was said to be a much more profound construction than the first temple. That's because King Herod was a builder. We know that all over the place. He built up in the Galilee. He's the guy who built Masada up. He's the one who built the temple. He did all of this stuff, King Herod. And so he built this magnificent temple that you can still see the outer constraining walls. That's what the Western Wall is, right? And so you can see, like in this picture, those bricks are supposed to be the wall, massive 1,000-ton bricks were not a minor thing. But also, it wasn't just about the destruction of the temple, it was also about the annihilation of Jewish land ownership and control of the land. And it's about massacres, it's about exile. And when you read Lamentations tonight, I suggest you read it from beginning to end. Just look it up online. Everyone has access, if you're on this Zoom, to the book of Lamentations. Read it. And I think it's chapter 4 where it talks about mothers eating their children because of the famine, the starvation. So it's gruesome, it's grisly, and I think that we have to sink into that place every once in a while. How about like once a year? We have to remember. Not easy. Deborah's got a head shaking.
Yeah, I really struggle with that. For people who are so concerned about eating kosher and really elevating food to the place of sacredness, the concept of eating your own children just seems to fly in the face of everything I know about what it means to be Jewish.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a story in the Talmud about two people in the desert. One container, imagine a cup, and in that flask is enough water for only one person to survive. And the debate is, what do you do? Do you share the water and both die? Or do you, because that's egalitarian, it's equal? Or does one person drink the water and the other dies? And the rabbis debate this. The two rabbis are Rabbi Akiva, and the other one is named Ben Petura, which literally means the son of the killed off one, something along those lines. It's definitely a fable for a name. And Ben Petura says, you have to share the water because it is a matter of life and death. And even though it is, you have to share the water because who's to say that you should have it and the other person doesn't have it? The quote in the Talmud, is your blood redder than the other guy's blood? Which is to say, why should you have it if the other person can't have it? You have to split it. It's a compelling moral argument. Akiba says, okay, fine, but we have other values here. And he says, no, whoever is holding the container of water, that person is obligated to drink all of the water, because that way that person is guaranteed to survive. And he then quotes the book of Deuteronomy where it says Chai Bahem, which means live through them, live through these laws. And he says that it is an obligation to sustain life whenever you know you can. And so Rabbi Akiba wins that debate, but one person has to die in that context.
But water is not a baby.
No, I understand that.
So what is the connection?
The connection is that a person who has no food alive needs to do what they can to eat. It's not that the person, it's a dead baby. It's not a baby that survived. It's not viable. The assumption of the text, I think, is not that you kill your baby and then eat it, which is gruesome and disgusting, but rather children are not able to survive starvation. Sadly, we know this, and we know it all too well right now. So you're obligated to survive. And that means eating things that you absolutely would never eat unless you have to eat it. Anyone else? Deborah's not happy with that.
I just don't think we can eat our babies. I mean,
Yeah,
even when push comes to shove, I don't think
no,
it's
I would
happening.
rather die.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think death is worse.
I mean, I think it's akin to what happened. I think all of us who are old enough to remember September 11th, we heard about people jumping to their deaths. You know, extreme measures happen at extreme moments.
Yes.
You know, this happened also at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in New York in 1913, I guess. Something
And
like
then we got Social Security.
Yeah, I mean, but you
So
had
good
these
things
women
come
jumping
at us.
out of windows to their deaths rather than being burned alive. So that's the topic at hand.
I appreciate your willingness to be open-minded and not judgmental towards the people who would have been faced with those choices. It's still inconceivable. And I'm not arguing. I'm simply
I don't
emoting.
think that, you know, there is no argument.
Yeah.
Look, it's dismal times. Dismal things happen. We're dealing with dismal things all the time these days.
Yes, that is true.
You know, I don't know. I'm beginning to feel really worn down by what's happened in Israel and in Gaza and the continuous war and the deaths and the pictures of hostages that are emaciated now, and the images of children in Gaza that are emaciated now. And yes, at least one of those pictures, it turns out, was not authentic. And then it becomes so stupid for the New York Times to post something that is not authentic when we know that there is authentic starvation happening in Gaza right now. So, you know, now there's people that are like, yeah, don't believe any of it because this picture was fraudulent. Well, it's not that simple. Of course, it's not that simple either as to what's going on, but I guess I don't know if that's outside my bailiwick or not, but I feel like we really have to understand what's going on. And if Israel is culpable, then that's a problem.
I have a question
Yeah.
about the baby thing. So when the two rabbis argue this topic in the Talmud, are they arguing through like every conceivable, example of what could happen? Is that what they do? They try to, think of scenarios where these certain things can be justified and how they can't be? Is that what they're doing? They're like
I'd have to go back and look.
because I mean there could be scenarios where you maybe your children are separated from you and you have one child, it's an infant, it dies. You need to make an effort to go and rescue the rest of your children, right? I mean, is that what the rabbis are doing? They're brainstorming on stuff like that?
I don't think. Why don't you mute yourself? We're all mute. There, I just muted you. um, I don't think that it's fleshed out with all the possible scenarios in this particular instance. Sometimes there are discussions that go on and on and on about different scenarios, but not in this one. I think this is a pretty short pericope, little unit of text. I'd have to go back and look. Um, but I think, you got only a finite amount of information. What do you do with it? And that's what they come up with. Okay, well, we didn't get into any of Ecclesiastes, but I do feel like we've learned a fair amount. I want to just maybe do one last thing, and that is to look at here. I'll have you guys watch what I'm doing. I want to go to the last line, which you're going to recognize, of Lamentations. I'm going to guess that it's 22 because there's 22. Yeah. So that's right. It's the second to last verse. So often what happens when you read a Jewish source that ends on a downside, you end up with not wanting to end on the most sour note. So that's how we do it when we read Lamentations. So tonight, someone will chant, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha V'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. That's the second to last verse, which you might have heard before. We sing it when we put the Torah away. Return to us, Adonai. Return us to you, Adonai, and we shall return. Renew our days as of old or as of ancient days. Now, Carlos asked me the question about the connection between Tisha B'Av and the high holidays. Maybe you said high holidays, maybe you said Yom Kippur. But this line should say a lot. Hashivenu, cause us to return. That's both in the form of return us from our exile and return us to a pure state. It's both of those ideas. Hashivenu is the same word as teshuva, repentance. Return us, O Adonai, to you, and we shall return. And there's that song that we sing at Temple Beth El. What do we sing? Do we sing Hashivenu Adonai? No. Oh, what is the song that we sing? There's a
Is it Hashivenu Adonai Elohim? Is that it?
No, that's Hashkivenu. That's
okay. I thought that was okay.
No,
yes.
I'm thinking of High Holidays. Return. What is the song by Shlomo Carlebach? Return. Oh, return again. Return again. Return to the land of my soul, or whatever it is. That's focused on this verse, Hashivenu. It's not exactly the same melody, but we sing that on high holidays. At Temple Bethel, at least. And I think many liberal synagogues do. So that's a connection also between the two. Now, I mentioned to you that we end on a high note. So we'll sing Hashi, the person laning or reading Lamentations will sing Hashivenu Adonai Elecha V'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. And then they'll sing Ki Imaos Ma'astanu Katsafta Aleinu Ad Ma'od. For truly you have rejected us, bitterly raged against us. We don't want to end on that sad note. So we go back and sing, and that's why these are the same words. Hashivenu Adonai Elecha V'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Or Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. That's the Sof Pasuk, the end of the chapter. So that's the last words when we read Eicha tonight. We say, return us, Adonai, to yourself, to you, and we shall return. Renew our days as of old. So I want to wish all of you who are fasting at Tzom Kal, an easy fast, or at Tzom Ma'ashmuti, a meaningful fast. There's only 2 fast days a year. Oh, that's another connection, Carlos. Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur are the only days of the year that are fast days. We fast on Tisha B'Av, and we observe the 5 Inuyim, the sort of limitations on Tisha B'Av because of the destruction of the Jewish people's home. And we fast and we observe the 5 limitations on us on Yom Kippur, to remind ourselves of the destruction that is possible within us, and really of our mortality, and the fact that ultimately we are not immortal, that we are going to die. So I wish everyone an easy fast, or whatever it is that you're going to do. Find a way to observe it, even if it's just staying home and reading and maybe not eating the 2 Oreo cookies that you might otherwise eat.
Well, easy fast to you too.
Thank you.
And Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'll stay until everyone's gone.